A millionaire CEO sees a little girl crying in the rain and stops to help her. She's searching for a necklace her mum gave her before falling into a coma. But when he finds it, his world shatters. It's the same necklace he once gave to the woman he loved most. What happens next shocks everyone and will make you believe in second chances. If you love stories like this, you can help us by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Enjoy the story. Rain slashed against the tinted windows of Elliot Ward's luxury sedan as it navigated downtown streets. Through the cascade of water on glass, he spotted a small figure hunched near the curb, hands desperately searching through murky water flowing into a storm drain. Something about the child's determination made Elliot tap on the glass partition. "Stop the car, James," he said, the words escaping before he could question why. The umbrella snapped open as he stepped from the car, Italian leather shoes immediately soaking despite his caution. "Are you all right?" he called, his voice sounding foreign even to himself. The girl looked up, her face streaked with tears and rain, dark hair plastered against pale cheeks that reminded him of someone he'd spent years trying to forget. She wore a yellow raincoat that seemed too thin for the November chill. "I lost it," she sobbed. "My mummy's necklace fell off when I was walking home from Aunt Sarah's, and now it's going down there." Elliot crouched beside her, holding the umbrella over them both while rain soaked through his $5,000 suit. "Here, let me help," he offered, rolling up his sleeve to reach into the gutter water. "What does it look like?" "It's silver with a tiny blue stone. Mummy says it's her most special thing ever. She's sleeping in the hospital, and I was supposed to keep it safe for her." His fingers brushed against something metallic. "I think I've got it," he said, extracting a delicate silver chain with a teardrop-shaped blue topaz pendant. As he examined it, Elliot noticed something that made his breath catch. Tiny initials engraved on the back. EW plus AR. The world seemed to stop. 10 years ago, he had special ordered this exact necklace from a Swiss jeweler, a gift for Aurora Reynolds on their first anniversary. The blue topaz matched her eyes perfectly. "What's your name?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Lily," she answered, suddenly wary. "And your mother?" Elliot struggled to keep his voice steady. "What's your mother's name?" "Her name is Aurora. She's really pretty, but she's been sleeping for a long time since our car crashed. The doctors say she might wake up soon." Elliot felt the ground disappear beneath him. Aurora, his Aurora, was alive. And this child, could it be possible? The timing would be right. He searched for his own features among Aurora's unmistakable ones in Lily's face. "Is Aurora your mother?" he asked, his voice breaking as tears welled up. The question confused Lily, who nodded slowly. "I just told you that. Why are you crying, mister? Did you know my mommy?" Before Elliot could respond, a woman's voice called out, "Lily! Lily Reynolds!" A harried woman in scrubs hurried toward them. "I've been looking everywhere for you. You can't just run off like that." She stopped short at the sight of Elliot. "I'm sorry if she bothered you, sir." Morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows of Elliot's penthouse. He stood motionless, coffee cooling in his hand as he gazed at the city skyline, a view that had cost millions but failed to fill the hollowness inside him, the same hollowness that had been his constant companion since leaving Aurora at his father's insistence. "Ward men marry strategically, not emotionally," Raymond Ward had declared. In moments of brutal honesty, Elliot wondered if the empire he now controlled had been worth sacrificing the only person who had ever made him feel truly alive. His phone buzzed with messages, board members, investment opportunities, charity galas, each a reminder of the life he had chosen instead of love. At 42, Elliot Ward had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. The encounter with Lily had shattered his carefully constructed indifference, flooding him with memories of Aurora, her laugh, her dark curls, how she'd challenge his cynicism with unfailing optimism. No personal photos adorned his walls or surfaces. Nothing spoke of connections or belonging. He preferred it this way, clean, uncluttered, emotionless. Yet now the emptiness seemed to mock him. He searched Aurora Reynolds and hospital on his phone, yielding nothing useful. Privacy laws protected patient information. Elliot paced his living room, mind racing. The necklace was undeniably the one he had given Aurora, which meant Lily could be... He stopped himself. Hope was dangerous. Still, he couldn't shake the image of the little girl's face, with features that mirrored his own. Mr. Ward, your 9:30 meeting has been waiting for 15 minutes, his assistant called. Cancel it, he replied impulsively. Cancel everything today. Is everything all right, sir? She ventured, concern in her tone. Later that morning, Elliot found himself driving his rarely used Aston Martin through Aurora's old neighborhood, now gentrified with coffee shops and boutiques replacing the family-owned businesses she had loved. He walked the last few blocks to City General Hospital, heart hammering. What was he hoping to accomplish? He had no right to insert himself into Aurora's life or Lily's after all this time. Yet his feet carried him forward. The hospital lobby buzzed with activity, families waiting for news, staff hurrying between departments, the antiseptic smell mingling with coffee from the small cafe in the corner. Elliot approached the information desk, suddenly conscious of how out of place his tailored suit and command presence must seem. I'm looking for a patient, he began, his usual confidence faltering. Aurora Reynolds. The receptionist typed the name into her computer, then shook her head. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't provide patient information to non-family members. Of course, he should have anticipated this obstacle. Elliot was about to turn away when he spotted a familiar yellow raincoat across the lobby. Lily sat on a plastic chair, legs swinging, while the woman from yesterday, a nurse or caretaker he presumed, spoke with a doctor nearby. Lily's small fingers traced patterns on the condensation of the hot chocolate mug, her eyes, Aurora's eyes, lifting occasionally to study Elliot with undisguised curiosity. The hospital cafeteria hummed with subdued conversation around them, but Elliot heard nothing except the thundering of his own heart. So you're really rich? She asked suddenly, bluntness reminiscent of her mother. That's what Aunt Sarah said when I told her about the man who helped me find Mommy's necklace. Elliot smiled, despite himself, his first genuine smile in longer than he could remember. I suppose some people would say that, he answered carefully, wondering what else this Aunt Sarah had surmised about him. Sarah Mitchell, Aurora's cousin and apparently Lily's guardian while Aurora remained comatose, sat across from them, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. Her arms remained crossed, suspicion evident in every line of her body as she observed their interaction. I still don't understand why you're so interested in helping, she stated flatly, interrupting Lily's enthusiastic description of her school art project. Aurora never mentioned knowing anyone like you. The unspoken question hung between them. Who was he and what did he want? Elliot met her gaze steadily, knowing he deserved her wariness. We knew each other a long time ago, he offered, the understatement of the decade. Did you know my daddy too? Lily asked innocently, stirring her hot chocolate with focused attention. The question hit Elliot like a physical blow. Sarah's eyes widened in warning, her head shaking slightly. Lily, remember what we talked about? Some questions are for when Mommy wakes up, she interjected smoothly, but Elliot had already caught the implication. Lily didn't know who her father was. His mind raced with calculations, timelines, possibilities, the identical shade of green in Lily's left eye that he saw in his mirror every morning. Elliot cleared his throat, struggling to keep his voice casual. Has your mom ever mentioned your father? Sarah's face hardened and she leaned forward, voice lowered to keep Lily from hearing. Look, Mr. Ward, I don't know what your connection to Aurora was, but this isn't the time to satisfy your curiosity. She's fighting for her life upstairs and this child has been through enough. Elliot immediately backed down, raising his hands in a placating gesture. You're right. I apologize. He reached for his wallet, extracting a business card and sliding it across the table. I'd like to help if I may. Aurora was important to me once. Whatever she needs, specialists, private rooms, anything, please let me know. Sarah stared at the card, conflict evident on her face before she reluctantly took it. Lily, oblivious to the tension, had pulled out the necklace from beneath her shirt, letting the blue stone catch the fluorescent light. Mommy never takes it off except for her surgery. She says it's from someone special who gave her the most beautiful memories. She frowned slightly, tilting her head, but sometimes it makes her cry too. Elliot felt something crack inside his carefully constructed walls. Aurora had kept his necklace all these years, despite everything, despite his silence, despite his apparent abandonment. The thought that she might have shed tears over him made his chest constrict painfully. He had been taught that wards never showed weakness, but in that moment, he found himself dangerously close to breaking down in a hospital cafeteria. Sarah checked her watch and sighed. We should head back up. Dr. Mehta wanted to discuss Aurora's latest tests with me at 2. She gathered their empty cups, giving Elliot a measuring look. "Thank you for the hot chocolate, Mr. Ward." The dismissal was clear, but Lily seemed reluctant to leave. She hopped down from her chair, and to Elliot's surprise approached his side of the table. "You make a sad face when you look at my mommy's necklace," she observed, with a child's piercing insight. "Were you the special person who gave it to her?" Before he could formulate an answer that wouldn't betray too much, Sarah called Lily's name with gentle insistence. The girl gave him one last curious look before skipping away to join her aunt. Alone at the table, Elliot turned the empty cup in his hands, mind racing with implications and possibilities. The timing aligned perfectly. Aurora would have been pregnant when he'd made the choice that had defined the last decade of both their lives. If Lily was his daughter, why had Aurora never told him? Had she tried? Questions multiplied like fractures in ice. With sudden determination, he pulled out his phone and dialed his private investigator. "Matthews," he said when the man answered, "I need you to look into something discreetly." As he outlined what he needed, Elliot felt the first stirrings of something unfamiliar warming his chest, something dangerous and fragile that felt suspiciously like hope. 3 days later, Elliot found himself pacing the halls of City General's intensive care unit, a visitor's badge clipped to his suit jacket. The private investigator's report sat heavily in his briefcase, pages detailing Aurora's life since their separation. She had built a modest but successful career as an elementary school art teacher, beloved by students and colleagues alike. There were newspaper clippings of community projects she'd initiated, bringing art to underfunded schools. No mention of marriages or serious relationships, and Lily's birth certificate listed only Aurora as parent. Father, unknown. Each detail had pierced Elliot like a physical wound, evidence of a life well lived without him, yet with a conspicuous absence that matched his own. "Mr. Ward," Lily's cheerful voice echoed down the hallway as she spotted him. She broke away from Sarah's hold, running toward him with a drawing in hand. "Look what I made for Mommy." The crayon art showed 3 figures, a woman in bed, a small girl, and a tall man in a suit. "That's very good, Lily. Is that me?" he asked carefully. Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Uh-huh. You're helping Mommy wake up with your special doctor friends." Sarah approached more slowly, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "She insisted on including you," she explained, her previous hostility tempered by fatigue. "The neurologist you brought in says there's increased brain activity when we talk to her. They're cautiously optimistic." She paused. "I don't understand why you're doing all this, but thank you." Elliot reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package. "I got this for Lily. It's nothing extravagant, just—" Sarah unwrapped it to reveal a child-sized art set with professional quality supplies. "I noticed she likes to draw," he finished. Something in Sarah's expression softened. "She gets that from Aurora. Even before she taught art, Aurora could never pass a blank page without filling it with something beautiful." Later, sitting outside Aurora's room, Elliot found himself staring at the necklace he'd begun carrying in his pocket. The silver had tarnished slightly, but the blue stone still caught the light as it had when he'd first given it to Aurora. The memory faded, replaced by his father's cold voice. "She'll never belong in our world, Elliot. End it now, before you both waste more time on an impossible fantasy." A small hand on his knee startled him. Lily stood before him. "You look sad again," she observed. "Do you want to come say hi to Mommy?" Elliot glanced toward Sarah, who gave a small nod of permission. His heart racing, Elliot followed Lily into the room where Aurora lay still against white hospital sheets. 10 years had softened her features but done nothing to diminish her beauty. "Mommy, this is the nice man who found your necklace," Lily announced. "His name is Elliot, and he buys me hot chocolate and got me special art pencils." At the sound of his name, one of the monitors registered a slight change. Elliot moved closer to the bed, searching Aurora's face for any sign of recognition. "Hello, Aurora. It's been a long time." Morning sun streamed through the hospital room window, catching dust motes in slanted golden beams. 3 weeks had passed since Elliot's first visit to Aurora's bedside, and the room now bore subtle evidence of his regular presence. Fresh flowers delivered daily, premium coffee for the nurses, a comfortable reclining chair where he often sat during the long evening hours after Lily had gone home with Sarah. The neurologist reported continuing signs of improved brain activity, though Aurora remained unresponsive to external stimuli. Still, hope grew with each passing day, nurtured by Lily's unwavering belief that her mother would wake up when she's finished with her big sleep, and Elliot's quiet determination to be present when she did. Sarah entered with coffee, handing one to Elliot, a small peace offering. "Lily's school is having a career day next week," she said. "She asked if you would come talk about being a money person." Elliot nearly choked on his coffee. The request represented a level of integration into Lily's life he hadn't dared hope for. Of course, if you think it's appropriate," he managed. Sarah studied him over her cup. "You know, she has your smile. I didn't see it at first, but when she concentrates on her drawings, that little half smile just like yours." The words hung between them, the first acknowledgement of what they both suspected. "Sarah, I need to ask," she cut him off. "She never told me who Lily's father was. Not explicitly, but she kept that necklace all these years, and sometimes when Lily asks about her daddy, Aurora gets this look, like someone reopened an old wound." That afternoon, Elliot sat beside Aurora's bed, Lily perched on his lap, reading aloud. The child had gradually claimed more of his personal space, her initial wariness replaced by a familiarity that both thrilled and terrified him. If his suspicions were incorrect, the inevitable separation would devastate them both. As Lily finished the story, she looked up at him. "I used to ask Mommy for stories about my daddy," she confided softly, "but it made her too sad, so I stopped asking." Before Elliot could respond, Lily continued, "I think my daddy must have been nice, though, because Mommy keeps his special necklace and she only keeps nice things." The innocent observation pierced through Elliot's defenses. Nice was not an adjective that applied to a man who had abandoned the woman he loved for family approval and financial security. Dr. Chen entered with Aurora's latest brain scans. "I'm seeing some very encouraging patterns here. The increased stimulation protocol, the regular conversations, music, familiar voices, it's making a difference." She pointed to colored areas on the scan. "This suggests Aurora is processing external stimuli at a much higher level than before. I believe she may be able to hear you, even understand you, though she can't respond yet." She hesitated. "When certain voices speak, particularly Lily's, and interestingly yours, Mr. Ward, we see distinctive response patterns." After the doctor left, Elliot withdrew a small swab kit from his pocket. "Lily," he called softly, "would you like to play a science game?" Her eyes lit up as he explained how to swab the inside of her cheek, presenting it as a fun experiment rather than the life-altering test it potentially was. Sarah entered just as Lily handed him the completed swab, her expression shifting to understanding as she took in the testing kit. "I need to know," Elliot said simply, meeting her gaze without apology. Sarah nodded slowly, some of her earlier suspicion returning. "And if she is, what then, Mr. Ward? You walk back into Aurora's life after 10 years, claim a daughter you never knew existed, and everything's supposed to be fine?" The challenge in her voice was justified, the question itself one he'd been avoiding since the moment he'd recognized the necklace. Elliot looked at Lily, now back at her mother's bedside, showing her a new drawing, then back to Sarah. "I don't expect anything to be easy," he admitted quietly, "but I need to know if I have a daughter. And if I do, I intend to be the father she deserves, whether Aurora wants me in her life or not." The DNA results arrived via encrypted email on a Tuesday morning as Elliot sat in his office overlooking the city. For several minutes he simply stared at the notification, unable to open the attachment that would definitively answer the question consuming his thoughts. Around him, the trappings of success, awards, accolades, evidence of wealth and power, suddenly seemed hollow and meaningless compared to the potential connection contained in that unopened file. With a deep breath, he clicked on the attachment, scrolling through medical jargon until he reached the conclusion: probability of paternity, 0%. The words seemed to blur before his eyes as disappointment crashed over him like a physical wave, followed immediately by shame at his own selfish reaction. Sarah answered his call on the third ring, her voice wary. "The test results came back negative," Elliot stated without preamble, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Lily isn't my daughter." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally Sarah spoke, confusion evident in her tone. That doesn't make sense. Aurora there was never anyone else during that time. I was living with her when she found out she was pregnant. She was devastated when you—" She stopped abruptly, but the implication was clear. Aurora had believed Elliot was the father, had mourned his absence during her pregnancy. If not him, then who? The question hung between them, uncomfortable and insistent. Despite the negative results, Elliot found himself unable to stay away from the hospital. Some irrational part of him felt that abandoning Aurora and Lily now would be a second betrayal, regardless of biological connections. Yet his visits became less frequent, shadowed by a growing sense that he was intruding on a family to which he had no rightful claim. Lily noticed the change immediately, her innocent questions about his absences piercing him like knives. "Are you going away forever like Mommy's other friends?" she asked during one visit, her small face serious as she colored beside Aurora's bed. The implication that others had drifted away from Aurora's life after the accident tightened something in Elliot's chest. "No," he promised, with more conviction than he felt. "I'm not going anywhere." A week later, Dr. Patel, the hospital's lab director, requested an urgent meeting with Elliot and Sarah. They sat in his cramped office, surrounded by medical texts and framed diplomas, as the doctor cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We've discovered a procedural error that occurred in our lab last Tuesday," he began, shuffling through papers on his desk. "2 samples were accidentally switched during processing, a paternity test and a bone marrow compatibility screening." Elliot's pulse quickened as Dr. Patel continued. "When reviewing the chain of custody records, we realized your sample, Mr. Ward, was among those affected. We'd like to repeat the test to ensure accurate results." The second test results arrived while Elliot sat beside Aurora's bed, reading aloud from one of Lily's storybooks long after the child had gone home with Sarah. The email notification on his phone seemed to pulse with potential, but he forced himself to finish the chapter before opening it. This time the conclusion was unambiguous. Probability of paternity, 99.999998%. The book slipped from his fingers, landing with a soft thud on the hospital floor. He stared at Aurora's peaceful face, overwhelmed by the confirmation of what he had suspected from the first moment he'd seen Lily's familiar half-smile. He had a daughter who had lived 5 years without him, who had never known her father existed, who had grown within Aurora's body even as he turned his back on their love. Emotions cascaded through him: joy, grief, anger at his own blindness, at his parents' manipulation, at the lost years he could never reclaim. His hand found Aurora's, fingers curling around her unresponsive ones as tears blurred his vision. "We have a daughter," he whispered, voice breaking on the words. "Aurora, we have a beautiful, incredible daughter." The monitor tracking her brain activity registered a slight increase, as it often did when he spoke directly to her. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If I had..." The thought remained unfinished, the alternative timeline too painful to contemplate. Would he have defied his family for a child when he hadn't found the courage to do so for love alone? Later that night, as Elliot drove home through quiet streets, his phone rang with Sarah's number. Her voice sounded strained, urgent. "You need to come back to the hospital. Lily found something in Aurora's old purse, the one from the accident that just came back from storage." Elliot made an illegal U-turn, heart pounding as Sarah continued. "It's a letter, Elliot. A letter addressed to you dated 5 years ago." The implications hit him with physical force, nearly causing him to swerve. Aurora had tried to contact him. She had written to tell him about their child. "What does it say?" he demanded, pressing harder on the accelerator. Sarah's voice was tight with emotion when she answered. "It says it's the 6th letter she wrote you, the 6th letter you never answered." Rain lashed against the hospital windows, echoing the storm of emotions inside the small conference room where Elliot sat with his head in his hands. On the table before him lay Aurora's letter, the 6th and final attempt she had made to reach him, never sent, but preserved in the lining of her purse like a time capsule of broken hopes. The paper was worn at the creases, as though she had folded and unfolded it many times before sealing it away. Elliot's eyes burned as he read the faded blue ink for what must have been the 20th time since Sarah had handed it to him 3 hours earlier. "Dear Elliot," it began, the formality a stark contrast to the love notes they had once exchanged. "This will be my last attempt to reach you." Aurora's elegant handwriting detailed her discovery of the pregnancy, just weeks after their separation, her initial hesitation to tell him given the circumstances of their breakup, and then her desperate attempts to contact him as her due date approached. 5 letters, Elliot. 5 chances for you to acknowledge your child even if you no longer wanted me. The words cut deeper with each reading. Your silence has been the clearest answer. I won't subject our daughter to the pain of rejection a 6th time. She deserves better than to wait for a father who chooses not to know her. The letter ended without the customary love, or even sincerely, just Aurora's name, a period marking the end of her hope. Sarah sat across from him, nursing a cold cup of coffee as the midnight hour approached. Her earlier antagonism had softened to something like pity as she watched Elliot absorb the implications of Aurora's words. She never said anything about the letters, Sarah said quietly. I just assumed you knew and wanted nothing to do with either of them. Elliot shook his head, still struggling to process the revelation. I never received a single letter. Not one, Sarah. His mind raced through possibilities. Had his assistant intercepted them? Had they been lost in mail? But 5 separate letters didn't simply disappear by accident. A cold certainty began to form in his gut, a suspicion so terrible he could barely acknowledge it. My parents, he whispered, the pieces falling into horrible alignment. Raymond and Eleanor Ward had made their disapproval of Aurora abundantly clear from the beginning. A scholarship girl from a working-class family was not suitable for the heir to the Ward fortune. When he'd finally ended things with Aurora under their relentless pressure, they had seemed almost gleeful in their victory. Had they intercepted her letters? Had they deliberately hidden his child from him? The thought made bile rise in his throat. I need to speak to someone who would know, he said, standing abruptly. Someone who was there when the letters would have arrived. Dawn found Elliot sitting in his car outside a modest suburban home, waiting for a reasonable hour to knock on the door. Margaret Davenport had been his parents' housekeeper for over 30 years before retiring 5 years ago. If anyone knew the truth about Aurora's letters, it would be her. At precisely 7 o'clock he approached the front door, heart hammering against his ribs. Margaret's face registered shock, then guarded recognition when she opened the door. Mr. Elliot, she greeted him warily, the formality a remnant of her decades in service. This is unexpected. He noted how her eyes darted past him to the street, as though checking if he'd come alone. That small gesture confirmed his suspicions before he even asked the question. I know about the letters, Margaret, he said quietly, watching her face pale. I know about my daughter. The older woman's shoulders sagged, guilt replacing the wariness in her expression. You'd better come in, she said, stepping aside to let him enter. Over strong tea served in delicate china, a parting gift from his mother, ironically, Margaret confirmed every dark suspicion. All 5 letters had arrived at the Ward family home, and all had been intercepted by his parents. Your father said it would only cause you pain, she explained, unable to meet his eyes, that the girl was trying to trap you with a baby that might not even be yours. Mrs. Ward, she paid her to go away, a substantial sum, Mr. Elliot, on the condition that she never contact you again. The betrayal cut deeper than Elliot could have imagined. His parents hadn't just separated him from Aurora, they had stolen his chance to know his own child from birth. Years of firsts, gone forever. Did Aurora take the money? He asked, dreading the answer. To his surprise, Margaret shook her head. No, sir. She threw it back in your mother's face. Said some things aren't for sale. That's when the threats started. Elliot looked up sharply. Threats? Margaret nodded solemnly. Mrs. Ward threatened to ruin her. Said she'd make sure Aurora never taught again, that she'd lose her scholarship, her apartment, everything. Your father had connections everywhere in this city, Mr. Elliot. They could have done it too. Later, sitting in his parked car with tears streaming unchecked down his face, Elliot finally allowed himself to feel the full magnitude of what had been stolen from him, from all of them. Aurora had been threatened and isolated while carrying their child. Lily had grown up without a father, not because he didn't want her, but because of a calculated deception, and he had spent 10 years in an emotional wilderness, never understanding why the pain of losing Aurora never truly faded. The cold, logical part of his brain, the part his father had carefully cultivated, reminded him that he could have fought harder, could have defied his parents for love. The guilt of his own weakness would be something he carried forever. Back at the hospital that evening, Elliot stood in Aurora's doorway watching Lily carefully arrange fresh drawings on her mother's bedside table. She looked up when she sensed his presence, her smile, his smile, momentarily stopping his breath. I made this one for you, she said, holding out a bright drawing of 3 figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. It's us when Mommy wakes up. The simple certainty in her voice, the easy inclusion of him in her vision of family, broke something inside him that had been frozen for years. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and for the first time gathered his daughter fully into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered against her dark curls, knowing the words were woefully inadequate for the gift she offered so casually, the chance to be her father. 3 months after Elliot's first encounter with Lily in the rain, Aurora's room had transformed from a sterile medical space into something approaching a home. Colorful drawings papered the walls, photographs of Lily's school events stood alongside fresh flowers, and a comfortable leather chair delivered from Elliot's penthouse had replaced the standard hospital furniture beside the bed. The monitoring equipment remained, but even it seemed less intrusive now, its steady beeping a reassuring soundtrack to the daily readings, conversations, and music that filled the room. Aurora's condition had improved incrementally, occasional finger twitches, changes in breathing patterns when Lily spoke, eye movements beneath closed lids that suggested REM sleep rather than deep coma. Elliot had restructured his entire life around hospital visits and Lily's schedule, delegating business responsibilities to trusted executives and working remotely between visiting hours. The corporate world that had once defined his existence now seemed distant and unimportant compared to the afternoons spent helping Lily with homework or the evenings reading to Aurora while holding her unresponsive hand. Sarah had gradually accepted his place in their unconventional family unit, her initial suspicion giving way to reluctant respect as she witnessed his unwavering commitment. They had developed an unlikely friendship born of shared concern for the 2 people at the center of their world. Dr. Mehta entered Aurora's room one Tuesday morning, his expression carefully neutral as he reviewed her latest test results. "There's been substantial improvement in brain activity," he explained to Elliot and Sarah. "The patterns suggest increasing awareness of her environment." He hesitated before continuing. "However, it's been nearly 4 months since the accident. The longer a patient remains unresponsive, the more we have to consider the possibility of permanent cognitive impairment." The words hung heavy in the air. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, and Elliot felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. "What are you saying exactly?" he demanded, his voice sharper than intended. "I'm saying we should prepare ourselves for all possibilities," the doctor replied gently. "Aurora may wake up completely, or partially, or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Sarah excused herself abruptly, tears already streaming down her face as she hurried from the room. Elliot remained frozen beside Aurora's bed, struggling to process the doctor's prognosis. He had returned to Aurora's life believing he could fix everything, that his resources and determination could overcome any obstacle, even this one. But for the first time, he confronted the possibility that some things might be beyond his control. The realization struck him with physical force, driving the air from his lungs. Later that evening, after Lily had gone home with Sarah for dinner, Elliot sat alone with Aurora in the dimming light. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, the same rain that had brought them together again after 10 years apart. The cosmic irony wasn't lost on him. "I don't know if you can hear me," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "The doctors think you can. I hope they're right." He took her hand, tracing the delicate bones beneath pale skin. "I found the letter, Aurora, the one you never sent. I know about all of them now." His voice broke as tears threatened. "I never received any of them. My parents, they intercepted everything. They threatened you, tried to pay you off, and you still protected our daughter." The confession poured out of him, his regret at not fighting harder for their love, the emptiness of the years without her, the discovery of Lily and the joy she had brought into his life. "She's extraordinary, Aurora. She has your creativity, your kindness, and apparently my stubborn streak." A half laugh, half sob escaped him. "She's the best of both of us, and you've raised her beautifully, all on your own." He paused, gathering courage for what he needed to say next. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, Aurora, if you can hear me, please come back to her. Lily needs you, and I—" The words caught in his throat, 10 years of suppressed emotion finally breaking through. "I need you too. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." The monitor tracking Aurora's brain activity spiked suddenly, its steady rhythm disrupted by an unexpected surge. Elliot stared at it, then back at Aurora's face, searching for any sign of response. For a breathless moment, he thought he saw her eyelids flutter, but they remained closed. Disappointment crashed over him with such force that he didn't notice the slight pressure against his palm at first. When he realized what was happening, his heart nearly stopped. Aurora's fingers were curling around his, applying the faintest pressure. "Aurora," he whispered, afraid to hope. "Aurora, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand again." The response was unmistakable this time, a definite, deliberate squeeze. Frantic activity followed as Elliot slammed the call button, bringing nurses and doctors running to witness Aurora's first conscious response in months. Medical staff crowded around the bed, performing rapid assessments while Elliot stood back, trembling with emotion and shock. His first instinct was to call Sarah and Lily, to share the miraculous moment, but Dr. Mehta urged caution. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he warned, though his own excitement was evident. "This is a positive sign, absolutely, but recovery from traumatic brain injury is a process, not an event. She's beginning to emerge from the coma, but there's no way to predict how complete the awakening will be, or how much time it will take." By midnight, Aurora had progressed to opening her eyes for brief intervals, though she showed no clear sign of recognizing her surroundings or responding to verbal cues. Elliot remained by her bedside, afraid to leave lest he miss any further development. Each flicker of her eyelids, each small movement sent hope surging through him. At dawn, Sarah arrived with Lily, having been updated by the night nursing staff. The little girl's eyes were wide with excitement as she approached her mother's bed. "Mommy," she called softly, climbing up to sit beside Aurora. "Mommy, it's me, it's Lily. I knew you'd wake up." As if responding to her daughter's voice, Aurora's eyes opened fully for the first time, lingering open as they slowly focused on the child's face. "Who are you?" Aurora's first words after waking sliced through Elliot like a physical blade. They weren't directed at him. She was looking at Dr. Mehta with confusion, but the implication was clear. When her gaze had passed over Elliot moments earlier, there had been no recognition, no spark of familiarity, just the blank assessment of a stranger. The neurologist had warned them about this possibility. Retrograde amnesia often accompanied traumatic brain injuries and prolonged comas, but the reality of it was devastating. Aurora recognized Lily instantly, her face softening with maternal love, and she seemed to know Sarah as well. But when introduced to Elliot, she merely nodded politely, as though meeting a colleague of her doctor. The weeks that followed tested Elliot's resolve in ways he couldn't have anticipated. Each day brought small improvements in Aurora's physical condition, strength returning to weakened muscles, coordination improving through therapy sessions, but her memory remained fragmented. The neuropsychologist explained that her amnesia appeared selective rather than complete. She remembered her childhood, her career, and everything about Lily, but significant portions of her adult personal life were simply gone, including, it seemed, every memory of Elliot and their relationship. He found himself in the bizarre position of being simultaneously essential to her recovery, funding specialists, arranging home care plans, and completely peripheral to her emotional landscape. "She asked about Lily's father today," Sarah confided quietly as they shared coffee in the hospital cafeteria, away from Aurora's room. She seemed confused, like she was trying to remember something important, but couldn't quite grasp it. Elliot's heart clenched painfully at the thought. "What did you tell her?" Sarah sighed, stirring her coffee absently. "Just that it was complicated and she should focus on getting stronger for now. The doctors don't want us overwhelming her with emotional revelations." She hesitated before adding, "But she keeps touching that necklace, Elliot. Even when she doesn't remember giving it to Lily for safekeeping, she reaches for it like a reflex." The necklace had become a tangible connection between them, the only physical evidence of their shared past that Aurora seemed to recognize, if only subconsciously. Elliot watched her fingers trace the blue stone during therapy sessions, her expression distant as though trying to capture some elusive memory. Once he had caught her examining the engraved initials, a small frown creasing her forehead. "E.W.," she had murmured softly. "Who is E.W.?" The question hadn't been directed at him, but he had nearly responded before catching himself. Dr. Chen had been clear. Aurora needed to recover these memories naturally, not have them forced upon her by well-meaning loved ones. Lily, with a child's adaptability, had accepted the strange situation with remarkable grace. She had transferred her previous narrative, that Elliot was Mommy's friend who helps us, to Aurora herself, explaining his presence in their lives as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Mr. Elliot makes sure you have the best doctors," she told her mother earnestly during one visit. "And he reads me stories just like you do, and he knows how to make hot chocolate with extra marshmallows." Aurora had listened to these explanations with polite interest, thanking Elliot with the distant courtesy one might show a generous acquaintance rather than a former lover and father of her child. The rehabilitation facility where Aurora was transferred after leaving the hospital was the best in the state. Private, discreet, with extensive grounds that provided a peaceful environment for recovery. Elliot had purchased a small house nearby, partly to be close to Aurora's therapy sessions, but primarily to create a familiar space where Lily could stay with him on the weekends Sarah needed a break. He had transformed the second bedroom into a child's paradise, walls painted sunshine yellow, Lily's favorite color, and shelves filled with art supplies and books. Creating this space for his daughter became a form of therapy for Elliot himself, a tangible way to begin atoning for the years he had missed. On a warm spring afternoon, 6 months after the accident, Elliot walked the rehabilitation center's gardens with Aurora, pushing her wheelchair along smooth paths bordered by blooming flowers. Her physical recovery had progressed remarkably. She could walk short distances with assistance, but tired easily on longer outings. These garden walks had become a routine, one the medical staff encouraged as beneficial for her recovery, and one Elliot treasured as rare moments alone with her. Today she seemed pensive, watching butterflies dance between flowers with unusual intensity. "Sarah told me you've been helping with Lily since the very beginning," she said suddenly, breaking their comfortable silence. "Why?" The question caught Elliot off guard, unprepared for the direction of her thoughts. "Because," he hesitated, searching for an answer that was both truthful and appropriate given her fragile memory. "Because I care about what happens to both of you." Aurora turned slightly in her chair to study his face, her expression thoughtful. "There's something familiar about you," she admitted quietly. "Sometimes when you speak or when you smile at Lily, it's like déjà vu, like I should know you better than I do." Hope flared in Elliot's chest, quickly tempered by caution. The doctors had warned against pushing too hard, against forcing connections that needed to reform naturally. That evening, alone in his newly purchased house, Elliot sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by architectural plans, his latest project and personal redemption. The Ward Foundation, historically focused on financial investments and business acquisitions, was being redirected toward community development under his leadership. Its first major initiative would be an arts-focused community center in Aurora's old neighborhood, with subsidized studio space for working artists and free classes for underprivileged children. The concept had come to him after reading Aurora's teaching philosophy in articles the private investigator had uncovered, her belief that art created bridges between different worlds, just as their love once had. His phone rang, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. Her voice when he answered was tense, controlled. "Aurora found the letter," she said without preamble. "The one she wrote to you that was never sent. She was organizing her things and found it in the lining of her old purse." Elliot's heart raced as Sarah continued. "She's asking questions, Elliot, about you, about the past, about Lily's father." This was the moment they had both anticipated and dreaded, the inevitable collision of Aurora's fragmented memory with the complicated truth. "The doctors said," he began, but Sarah cut him off. "I know what the doctor said, but she's determined, and you know how she gets when she sets her mind to something. She wants to see you. Tonight." The drive back to the rehabilitation center was a blur, Elliot's mind racing with possibilities. What would he say? How much did she remember? Would the truth help her heal or cause fresh trauma? By the time he arrived, darkness had fallen. The facility quiet, except for the soft footfalls of night staff. Aurora was waiting in the small private lounge, her back straight in the wheelchair, the letter unfolded in her lap. She looked up as he entered, and for the first time since awakening from the coma, her eyes held recognition. "Elliot Ward," she said softly, not a question but a confirmation. "EW, the necklace, the initials. It was you all along, wasn't it?" Morning sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains, painting golden patterns across Aurora's face as she slept. Elliot watched from the doorway of her rehabilitation center room, reluctant to wake her yet unable to leave. The previous night's conversation had stretched until dawn. Painful revelations, tearful explanations, memories slowly surfacing like treasures from a forgotten shipwreck. She hadn't remembered everything at once. Memory didn't work that way, the doctors had explained, But the letter had cracked open a door that had been firmly closed. "You were there when I woke up," she had said wonderingly. "But I didn't know who you were. How strange to forget someone so—" She hadn't completed the thought, but her fingers had gone to the necklace, tracing the small blue stone as if it anchored her to a past she was struggling to reclaim. When Aurora awoke, she greeted Elliot with genuine warmth rather than the polite distance that had characterized their interactions for months. Her memories were returning in fragments: the topaz necklace that matched the ocean where they first met, his laugh, their first kiss on the ferry. The neurologist had explained that emotional memories often resurface first, creating stronger neural pathways resistant to trauma. Significant gaps remained, including her pregnancy and their painful separation, but Elliot was careful not to impose his own narrative. Their daughter Lily adapted with childlike resilience, dividing her time between Sarah's apartment, Aurora's rehabilitation center, and Elliot's house. "Mummy forgot you because her brain got bumped," she explained to Elliot one evening. "But I never forgot you were nice, even when I didn't know you were my daddy." By summer, Aurora was released from rehabilitation to continue outpatient therapy. Elliot had purchased a larger, accessible house, but made no presumptions about who would live there. Their relationship existed in an undefined space, more than co-parents, but less than partners. The Arts Center groundbreaking ceremony coincided with Aurora's first day teaching again, a project Elliot had funded through the Ward Foundation, ensuring his name appeared nowhere in the plans. One September evening, exactly a year after Elliot had found Lily searching for the necklace, Aurora arrived at his home with Lily and Sarah. After Lily was tucked in, Aurora revealed she had visited his parents' graves, seeking understanding of their role in separating the couple. She showed him a journal of her returning memories, including the revelation that she had once attempted to deliver a letter to him in person, only to be intercepted by his mother. "When Lily was born, I almost called you again," she confessed, "but I'd convinced myself your silence was deliberate." She presented him with a small gift, a framed photograph of the three of them at the Arts Center opening, their first family picture. Aurora shared that Lily had asked if they could all live together, and she had told their daughter she needed to think about it. "I think that family isn't just about shared DNA or perfect memories," Aurora said, taking his hand. "It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's difficult." She suggested they deserved a second chance, not to reclaim who they were 10 years ago, but to discover who they might become together. Elliot kissed her hand gently, tears gathering in his eyes. "Welcome home," he whispered, as her lips found his, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. Whether she had come home to him or he to her hardly mattered anymore. They had found their way back to each other, and in doing so discovered that home was not a place at all, but the love they had never truly lost, only misplaced for a while, like a precious necklace waiting to be found again.